Good morning, maybe good early evening to everyone out there in the virtual world. Woo, woo, woo. I am so super excited to be here with you all. Now, I know that this has probably been a jam-packed, enriching, fulfilling day of learning everything that has to do with internal comms, with employee engagement, employee experience. So go ahead right now and give yourself a pat on the back. Come on, do it. I can't see if you're doing it or not. Give yourself a high five. It has been an amazing day, and I am super duper excited to close out the #1 conference for internal communicators. So I had to bring a little bit of energy. I know you're coming back from a break. My name is Sherhara Downing, and I am a public speaking coach and trainer. So you're probably wondering, public speaking, Sherhara, what is that now that we're all in the virtual space? Well, it's things exactly like this. Overall, I help professionals and entrepreneurs speak with more confidence, credibility, and clarity. And that also goes into the space of working with teams in the corporate atmosphere. Now, I've worked with companies like Toyota. Of course, here we have, right here. You see me working, and I've done with Under Armour, Samsung, the list does go on. I will tell you that, but one of my most proud achievements, I am a subject matter expert on the cult classic film Coming to America, starring Eddie Murphy in Arsenio Hall. So I don't know if y'all are even familiar with that movie, but let me tell you, that is the movie that gives me life all day, every day. So just a little tidbit about me so that we can kind of get to know each other. So that's a little bit about me, but we're talking about perhaps a very touchy, sensitive, controversial subject matter today, right? And I want this to be a space where you consider self, okay? This is about you. Today, you've probably learned a lot of different strategies and techniques on how to connect with the people in your office, how to get buy-in from folks higher up, how to get people to contribute and collaborate, how to get people to engage. But there's another space where you yourself are the communicator. But then there's a space of understanding self to a point where you can not only just be an effective communicator, but a progressive communicator and a compassionate communicator. So I'm looking on all of these different things. I don't know if I can even see some of the chat, people in the chat, or perhaps in the poll. Let's see if production can shoot me a little note to see how I can see people who are chatting. But I do want to get some of your feedback. Oh, here we go. Let's see, event. Here we go. I think we can do main stage. All right. Oh, I see y'all. Hey, Sharon, Charity. Oh, Rakisha. Okay, I see the chat now. Y'all bear with me, okay? I am talking to a lens. Charity says, I love Coming to America. She says her husband's favorite. Okay, so in the chat, just so that I know that you all are with me, let me know where you are dialing in from. Where are you dialing in from? Are you coming from the U.S.? Megan, where are you calling in from? It's like calling in like I'm a radio DJ or something like that. My mom is here. Isn't that fun? Yes, Wake and Gabriel, I am trying to wake y'all up. NYC is in the house. Come on, let's drop those locations. I heard that this Belgium, Colorado, San Francisco, Vancouver, Raleigh, Germany, Scotland, Canada, more Canada, San Diego's in the house, Houston, Texas, London, the UK, Johnson City, Michigan. Woo, okay, Minneapolis. Love Minneapolis, okay? I love Manny's, the steakhouse, okay? Louisiana, Seattle. I love the underground tour in Seattle. Hampshire, Washington, D.C., Belgium. Oh my goodness gracious, Dallas, Texas. I had a colleague who was connecting from Japan. Oh my goodness, Megan, that is absolutely amazing. So I am so glad now that I found that little place where I can chat with you all, because I feel so much closer to you right here and right now. So here's the thing. Hey, Chicago, Katie from Chicago. This is going to be a fun and interactive talk today, okay? We're closing it out, and I want to end on a really high note. Now, we know, especially here in the US, there's a lot going on in the space of race relations, right? Civil justice, or as we've been seeing, civil unrest. And it's pouring into where we work. It's showing up in our very intimate and personal spaces, even as we interact with all of our coworkers. And in the space of communicating, I've been invited a couple of times. What up, Detroit in the house? The Dirty D. I've learned that people are bringing me in to talk about some of these very difficult conversations, especially with some of the things that have popped up with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor here in the States. And it makes for people to feel, I'm not even going to lie and pretend, very uncomfortable. But yet, these are subject matters and topics and sentiments that we have to broach head on. And that's the reason why Staffbase has brought me here. They joined me, they invited me to a panel a couple of months ago, and we just had some real candid conversations about what are we doing to amplify Black voices, or what are we doing to create an inclusive environment? What are we doing to actually be proactive in creating a culture that all people feel welcome? And so that conversation has now spawned into my talk today. But I want to just be, again, transparent and honest. Race is not race is sometimes a very difficult thing to talk about. Even so much so that I kind of resist being the person that comes to talk about it, right? And I'm not here to make people feel bad. But I do acknowledge that sometimes these conversations can make you feel just a little bit uncomfortable. Now, I want to just test it out right now. And there's this thing that I do with all of my virtual conferences or meetings, especially when I can't see your faces. I do this thing called hands. Hands would kind of be like a round of applause, or hands would be like, I agree with you. So in the chat, I put hands. And so hands is really saying, I hear you. I agree. I'm with you on that one. So if you are in a space with your company that you tend to feel a little uncomfortable talking about race, or maybe even a little bit tired of talking about race, then go ahead and put some hands in the chat. I want you to be honest, okay? If you find yourself feeling a little uncomfortable, maybe getting a little sweaty underneath the armpit, I want to see if you feeling that way. We are internal comms disagree as to how it's becoming something that we really look for in our organization. Yeah, so we're getting some folks who are joining in and saying, hey, Terrence Booker. Hey, Terrence, I think I know you. Yeah, and so for those of you who are sharing and you're putting hands in the chat, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for being transparent. And that right there, that's the first part of moving into a space where we're really listening and we're really moving into a culture where we have to deal with the elephant in the room, right? So thank you for everybody that joined in on that. Now, my talk is called The New Language of Racism, right? And what does that mean? It means that racism is sometimes a difficult thing to kind of understand, right? You can't see it or point it out. It happens in much more subtle ways. And it's happening in our offices, it's happening in our meetings, it's happening within our interpersonal communication, in our actual our workplaces. Okay, so the thing about this is we may be, just saying, we may be supporting or perpetuating or actually giving life to systemic racism by some of the very little things that we say on a day-to-day basis. You're like, oh, not me, not me, not me, that's not me. Well, here's the thing. It very well may be you, but be okay, because it doesn't make you a bad person. It just means that we have to become more aware of what this language looks like, okay? So if you are willing to show up here and then listen to perhaps some new ideas that may break down what the new language of racism sounds like and looks like, I'm so happy that you're willing. I'm glad that you're here. Charlene says preach. So give me hands if you are ready to be introduced to something that you may not have known could be perpetuating and supporting systemic racism, or finding little, almost like gnats. You know how gnats are in your kitchen? You leave some fruit out and those gnats seem to just pop up everywhere and you don't know where they come from. Okay, the new language of racism is something like gnats in your kitchen. It's something like gnats that just seem to come out of nowhere in your workplace. I see the hands. Yes, I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm excited. Okay, so I will be referencing, of course, race. And as you all can tell, I'm a Black woman. Shout out to all my Black women and shout out to all my ladies in the house, and big shout out to all the fellas, right? But I am also going to be speaking from my own personal experience. So I oftentimes will say Black, and I also will say people of color as well, okay? So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. So what we're gonna do, let me go ahead and share my slides, right? I kind of gave you all of the ins and outs of what we got going on here. I want to share my screen, and I'm going to move into my presentation here. Let's see. One moment. Present. I wanted to go full screen. Let's try this again. Let's try this again. Oh man. I don't know why it's not going full screen, ladies and gentlemen, but we'll try it again a little bit later. Okay, so here we are, the new era of employee experience. Y'all are here with me. Absolutely love it. So here we are, the new language of racism, right? That is what we're going to be talking about, but we're going to be doing it a little bit differently, okay? It's not going to be the same way. Where I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to lecture. I'm not going to tell you what you should and should not be doing. This is not what it's going to be about. It's going to be about being aware. So the next piece of this is how to be anti-racist game show. Okay, edutainment at its finest and most engaging. All right, I know that these conversations can get really heavy. I know that these conversations can sometimes make us feel like it's a burden. Oh my God, like maybe being in third grade and you have to read and you just want to go outside and play, right? So I know that this is heavy subject matter. So for the space of this conference and being the closeout, I wanted to put a little spin on how we educate ourselves about aspects of racism and how we communicate that in our workplaces. So it's the how to be anti-racist game show. All right, edutainment. When I say edutainment, I'm definitely meaning edutainment is educating and it's also fun. Okay. So if you're with me, I think, let me check. Oh, wow. Sending you much love and support right now. Okay. I'm loving the conversation. Yes. Good conversations in the chat, y'all. Definitely keep it going. Keep it going. Okay. So back to, let's bring this back to my screen here. Bada bing, bada boom. All right. So the first thing that I want to tell you is we're going to do this a little bit differently. We're going to play in two different ways. Okay. There's this thing called Poll Everywhere, and we're going to actually play along. Okay, you're going to answer some questions and you're going to test out your knowledge based off a certain terminology. Okay, and we're going to get real specific with it, but you're going to be able to play along. So whether you're on your phone or you're on your desktop, go to pollev.com/Sherhara046, and that will officially make you a contestant in the How to Be an Anti-Racist game show. Okay, so you're going to go to that, and then it's going to click you along as we move throughout this game show so that you can answer. Then it's also going to put up a leaderboard. Okay, now this is just a fun and different way to learn some new terminology. So if you're on your phones, if you're on your desktop, make sure you head to Poll Everywhere. You can go ahead and put your name in. You can come up with a name if you want to, but that's how you're going to physically play. And the second way is we're actually going to put the chat also a poll in Hopin, in the actual chat. Okay, so you all will be able to play along both ways. Now, if you've got a competitive edge to yourself, you can join us on Poll Everywhere, and then that's going to bring up the leaderboard. But if you want to just play along and not have to be in the competition, so to speak, then you can also share with the polls. The next way to play is to think. And I know you've probably been thinking all day, but I want you to just think about yourself and how you show up in the workplace, okay? I want you to consider and think about your conversations with the people around you. And then I want you to share, as y'all are already sharing in the chat. I know that you're already sharing in the chat, so that's exactly what I want you to do. And more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, I just want you to learn. I want you to learn something new. If you walk out of here with one aha moment from our time together as we close out this amazing conference, I want you to learn one thing, one personal call to action that you can take in your workplace. And not only just in your workplace, but even in your personal life, okay? So that's how I want this to flow. Is everybody with me? Let me come back here and see. All right, everybody's with me. I see, I'm just checking the chat. All right, edutainment, Boogie Down Productions reference, yes indeed. Okay, good stuff. All right, just wanted to make sure I check the chat. So now, moving on. Here we go. We got round one, okay? Round one, and I'm just telling y'all right now, there's only one round, okay? We're not going boxing. I don't even know how many rounds, 12 rounds in boxing. We're not doing 12 rounds. It's only round one. So make sure you join us on Poll EV. And then I'm going to bring this up just like this so that you guys can play along. So now in the poll and also on Poll Everywhere, and you can see on my screen now, you've got the URL for you to go to. And I want you to consider, which is a microaggression? We're going to get specific. If you've ever heard of it, kind of familiar with it, which is a microaggression? Now you guys can chime in. You've got just about 15 seconds. A small yet meaningful act of snubbing, a physical enactment of power dynamics, the statement of a racist belief, a way of being more inclusive in the workplace. Let's see what we've got. Uh-oh. Let's see here. Let's see. It locked. Oh, no. Okay. Let's try this one again. I'm going to just exit out of this. For some reason, it said that it was locked. I don't know why it did that, ladies and gentlemen. Give me 1 second, because I definitely want to play. I want you guys to play along. I got a couple of responses, and for some people, it's saying that it's locked. I got few responses, but then it said that it's locked. Thank you all so much for just hanging tight with me. Anywho, let's see. Poll is locked. Okay, go to the Hopin Polls tab to submit your answers. Let's just play along this way. Which is a microaggression? A yet meaningful, small act of snubbing, a physical enactment of power dynamics, the statement of a racist belief, a way of being more inclusive in the workplace. What are some responses are you guys putting out there? What would you say that that is? Let's see. Oh, gotcha. Thank you, Camellia. We'll try it again on the next question. We'll try it again. Got it. Okay. Oh, you know what? Since we're all in this together, let's try this again. Let's try this again. And I'm going to add some more time on here so that people can actually submit. This may work better. All right, let's try this again. Which is a microaggression? Let's see. See, ladies and gentlemen, see if you can try. Okay, I see the results coming in. Awesome. All right. Okay. It was probably just the timing. Thank you, Camelia, for helping me out with that. I'm seeing all of the different total responses coming in. This is good. All right. So I made the timer a little bit longer so that you guys could chime in. So thank you so much for working with me on that one. That 1 second. Boom, boom. Here we go. And now I can show you how this comes up in our responses. Check this out. There we go. All right, 87% of you say a small yet meaningful act of snubbing. Congratulations, 87% of you are familiar with what a microaggression is. And for those of you who do choose B and C, I could totally see how that works, because there is a power dynamic at play with the microaggression. And microaggressions are very much related to a racist belief, but microaggressions can also be put on any minority group. So even if it's women or people who are disabled, or even those who have different sexual preferences. So that can be applied, microaggressions can be applied to just about anyone who is in a marginalized group. But for the most part, a small yet meaningful act of snubbing, right? That is exactly what a microaggression is. Let's see here, share this out. And then I want you guys to see these results, how that works there. Bada bing, bada boom, right? So even though you may consider the fact that it has everything to do with just race, but it also has a lot to do with just being a marginalized group as well. And the idea behind highlighting this is a actual definition for a microaggression, but the everyday slights, the put downs, the insults, that marginalized people experience in their daily interactions. Microaggressions are often linked to our unconscious bias. Ooh, see, that occur outside of our consciousness and may be unintentional. Microaggressions may occur verbally or non-verbally and can make people feel ashamed and dehumanized. Now, in the chat, if you've ever dealt with a microaggression, give me some examples, okay? And I'm using microaggressions as the one aspect that perhaps it's those gnats that are showing up in your workplace, that are showing up in your meetings. Microaggressions is that one subtle aspect of the new language of racism. No, it's not overt as we have seen in depictions of the 60s, but the new language of racism shows up in these microaggressions. And oftentimes we wouldn't even believe that a microaggression can support systemic racism. So I'm going to jump over here to the chat really quickly and see what you guys are putting in here. Megan says, a colleague asked me if they should contact my male boss because they didn't like my response. Megan, amen. That is a microaggression, and that's based off of gender. And then Couture, she says, I picked snubbing because it felt a bit too benign for me. And in that space of like a snub, it's a subtle way of kind of turning your nose and dismissing. And that then exasperates how you are not a part of the culture. So it extends a space of not belonging, which then does not support inclusivity. You know, so that space of snubbing is keeping people feeling like they're an outsider, being talked over or dismissed by men in meetings. Cindy, you're absolutely right. Yep, articulate. Someone repeatedly asking me where I went to college, or I write so well, or I speak so well. Y'all got it absolutely right. That is what it is. You speak so clearly. You're so articulate. That is definitely one of the ones that you'll hear a lot. Where are you from? Where are your parents from? Sophia, you're absolutely right. This is talking about people who may be from a different country. You have a different ethnicity. Oftentimes just not being the dominant culture, the dominant race, or again, going back into this space, being that marginalized group. That's what's happening there. Where exactly are you from? Why can't I just be American, right? Why can't I just be American? I think that is a great example, Teresa, of a microaggression. Cutting you off when you speak, dismissing your voice. Dismissing a voice is certainly an example of of microaggression. And so for today's talk, as we continue to move down understanding and becoming aware of what microaggressions are and what they look like, this is just the one piece that we're going to talk about today, and how in our workplaces and the way that we communicate with one another, that is the aspect of racism that shows up. It shows up on the backs of microaggressions. Kavina says, I've definitely been told I'm not American, even though I was born here. Oyin says, can I touch your hair? Girlfriend, yes, 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 yes. Alyssa says, snubs about millennials. We're grown adults, not kids. Yes, I totally feel you on that one. We are well into our career, but yet millennials still are the scapegoats for so many different things. And so we hear these things and they show up in our workplace, and it's just a great example of how microaggressions are just a small part of how racism is played out in the workplace. And it's extremely important for us to recognize that and see that, so that we realize sometimes when we talk about race, when we talk about racism, we talk about all of the injustices that may happen in the workplace. It sometimes can feel very overwhelming. Like, where do we even begin? Where do we even start? How do I even fight it? What ways do I show up? And the reason why I'm just focusing on microaggressions, because microaggressions are expressed through the way we communicate. And we're all communicators here. And so if there's a front line that we step to in the fight against racism, us being communicators, microaggression could be that those things that we go out, we could be the microaggression police. You know, we could be the people who are much more educated and aware of how racism is subtly being put into conversations. And so I then even to myself say, well, what am I supposed to do for racial equality? It can feel so overwhelming, but me being a communicator, the best way I believe that I can show up is understanding what microaggressions are, and then educating other people about microaggressions. All right, so next question. Here's the next question. I'm gonna also put this up here so you guys can see it. Move to the next one. Oh, here's the leaderboard. Oh, we've got a lot of people up here. Oh, we have a lot of people with 1,000. Okay, so lots of top people with 1,000. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Just so that you guys can see the leaderboard. Okay, next question. What is often at the root of a microaggression? What's causing these microaggressions? Where do microaggressions, like, you know how I talked about the gnat in the kitchen? Where did that gnat come from? Where did the microaggression come from? What's at the root? Is it A, jealousy, B, unconscious bias, C, insecurity, or D, nothing? Nothing really makes it happen. What is often at the root of a microaggression? Let's see how much time. I think we got just under 10 seconds left on this. I'm gonna try this again. See, oh look, big screen. Now it worked. Okay. So now, let's see, the time is up. We got 51 results in. I'm gonna click to the next one, see what we got for the responses. Ding, 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 ding. Oh my goodness, y'all, give yourselves a round of applause. What is often at the root of microaggressions? And yes, it is unconscious bias. We're gonna talk a little bit more about that. For those of you who did put insecurity in there, but you're right with that as well. That power play that we talked about earlier in that first question, sometimes people may not feel like they're in power. They may feel like they're being undermined. So that stems from a space of insecurity for them to then kind of attack, you know, then to kind of throw that snub. So for those of you who put the insecurity, that's valid. But the main reason why people are culprits of expressing microaggressions is because of unconscious bias. Now, unconscious bias is another term that I'm not going to go into great detail on, but it's the assumptions, the stereotypes, and the unintentional actions, both positive and negative. And I want to underline that word, unintentional actions, we make towards others based off identity labels like race, religion, age, gender, sexual orientation, or ability. Because our implicit associations are stored in our subconscious, we may act on our biases without even realizing it. Often our implicit biases contradict our values. And I want to sit with that just for a second, because unconscious bias is a part of the new language of racism. And I'm using the word subtle because it's so ingrained within us that it's just, we don't even have to activate it. Sometimes we don't even know the bias that lives within us, and that we have to be active. We have to be active when we're working in these spaces. We can't just sit back and say, you know what, I'm all good. I don't have these things. Conscious ignorance, often true. Also ignorance. I'm looking at the comments. And misinformation about a group of people. Exactly, Oyin. Exactly. I'm reading comments. Yes. So the reason why I put unconscious bias, but I do believe that unconscious bias is the source of why so many microaggressions are committed. And microaggressions are expressed through the way we communicate. But what we communicate is based off of our perspective, based off of our upbringing, based off of the images that we've kind of indoctrinated, the things in which kind of seep in. Even just a very basic example is people who are all about iPhone versus Android. Not trying to reduce this, but it's this idea that there are certain things that you understand and learn based off of what an Android is if you're an iPhone user. And sometimes iPhone users turn their nose up to Androids because of just what's perceived from the outside and not truly understanding how an Android functions and what makes an Android great. Hence, just Charles Fox, you got it. Hence the phrase, I don't see race. It is well-intentioned yet problematic and impossible. Of course, you have to see race. Then you're pretending. And that's where that unconscious bias comes in. Exactly. So with that being said, we've now moved through 2 of these, and we've got just a couple of more that I want to introduce to you all. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen once more, and we're going to go into the next question. Pulling up my screen, bringing it back here. Still got everybody on the leaderboard. Awesome, everybody. All right, here's the next one. Which of these sayings are microaggressions? Which of these sayings are microaggressions? Some of y'all already added some of these in here. You're so articulate. When I look at you, I don't see color. Y'all already got it. As a woman, I know what you go through as a racial minority. Everyone can succeed in this society if they work hard enough, or all of the above. I think that you all are already on top of it here. Some of you have already shared these in the chat. But sometimes we need to make sure we've got about 32 results that made it in. Some of y'all are doing it on the poll as well. Yes, all of the above, definitely all of the above. Everyone can succeed in this society if they work hard enough. All of these are microaggressions. All of them are microaggressions. And the reason why we put those up there is because there are some people who may not have known that these are microaggressions. People have all of the above. Yep. And if we can't recognize what these microaggressions actually sound like and look like, then perhaps we can't then speak up in times where someone is actually saying one of those phrases or moving in the direction of sharing sentiments that can be perceived as a microaggression. Okay, so if we're not aware of it, then how can we possibly combat it? How can we possibly support someone who is receiving comments as in microaggressions? Okay, so now we're all becoming a little bit more aware. Even though I got to say, y'all, kudos to y'all. Y'all got this down pat. This is something that you're already familiar with. So now what I want to do is head back to the poll. We've got two more before I kind of dive into some spaces of what we can do to actually combat microaggressions. All right, check it out. Megan is now on top of the leaderboard, but everybody, we got a lot of close seconds in there. Good job, Megan. Here's our next one. Which of the following might be called a microaggression? And I make a distinction between the other one, which says, but which of the following might be called a microaggression? Dismissing an individual who brings up race and culture and work. I saw someone put that in the chat. Mistaking a person of color for a service worker. A white person waits to ride the next elevator when a person of color is on it, or all of the above. And I say might be called a microaggression because these are moving into more of the spaces of an action and not just speaking or communicating a microaggression. But these are sometimes how the new language of racism pops up in our actions. So we got some results that have been put on there. And then yes, all of the above. So even if you said dismissing an individual who brings up race, mistaking a person of color for service worker, all of these are seen as microaggressions. Now I'm gonna stop share here, make sure I can get into the chat. Yeah, we got all, everybody's in here, all of the above when it is done subconsciously. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Now, my question to the chat now is, of these microaggressions that have either been said or kind of been done in an act, and let me just see hands in the chat, how many of you have actually, of these examples, experienced this personally, these microaggressions being told to you, or these microaggressions being exhibited on you? If you're in this boat, then let me see some hands. Let me see who all is dealing with perhaps the frustration of having to combat microaggressions on their own. In the chat. There we go. Yeah, I see you, exactly. Good. Okay. And so now in this space as well, there's an opportunity as you're creating the company culture, as you're putting out all of the information and just the communication in general that you have at your company. It's not even just in that space, it's also in the space in which we work together. And there's some things that I'm going to offer to you as we get to this very last poll. I'm going to review a couple of things that we can do, just call to actions. And this is the space that I was mentioning earlier, these call to actions that you can use and take home and say, this is what I'm going to take up for myself. All right, let's move into leaderboard. Megan is still in the lead. And then we've got Gabriel, Andrea, Julianne, and Brianna in the top 5. But everybody's doing great. Love it. Good job, Megan. All right, here's the next one. Microaggressions foster an inclusive workplace. I think this one, y'all pretty much know this one. Microaggressions foster an inclusive workplace. What do you say? Is it true or is it false? Is it true or is it false? Microaggressions foster an inclusive workplace. And I think that I don't ever want to just assume that people, one, will understand what a microaggression is. And secondly, then not really truly understand how microaggressions can affect the workplace, right? And we want to move from a place of making assumptions and then also now educate. So we've got some results in here. Awesome, awesome. Let's go ahead and see what the answer was. And you got it right. That is false. Microaggressions do not foster an inclusive workplace. Okay, so that is certainly false. Let's see who we've got at the top of the leaderboard. Megan is still in the top of the leaderboard. Gabriel coming in at a close second. Awesome stuff, y'all. Awesome stuff. So here's the thing that I now want to move into, right? And if you're writing down, I thought I wasn't competitive. Turns out that you are. Megan, you're competitive now. So if you got a pen and paper, I want you to write down a couple of call to actions. And I'm going to talk a little bit about these call to actions and just kind of make them really simple. We understand what microaggressions are. We're sensing how it can be an extension of racism and how it's communicated in the workplace. And now we can identify it and keep an ear out for it, right? But now, how do you actually combat it? How do you actually create solution? How do you create, people always talk about how do we create an inclusive workplace? Eradicating microaggressions, being able to identify microaggressions, being able to call out people who may not be aware that they just spoke a microaggression. Okay, so here's the first one. Be aware and reflect. Write that one down if you feel like that's where you need to be. Because we're all at different levels, so to speak, in how we combat racism. And for some of us, it's really just now becoming aware, like, oh, wow, didn't really know that. Oh, wow, I didn't realize that that phrase could be interpreted as a microaggression or could be offensive, right? So be aware and then also reflect too. Be aware and reflect on what it means to you and perhaps what it means for the other person. That's the first one, okay? So if we're in these spaces and we want to create an inclusive environment, then we need to be aware of what microaggressions look and sound like. Megan says, working in a global organization, there are people who say it's just my culture and microaggressions are a Western concept. And it very well perhaps may stem from a space of a Western concept, but whether it's a Western or an Eastern concept, it very well may be a concept that lives in your office, no matter where it may have derived, no matter where it may be predominantly acted out in. If it exists in your workplace, then it's your concept now. Awesome. Okay, you wrote that one down. Second way of combating or creating an inclusive workplace and combating racism and how it shows up in the very subtle ways is to listen. Listen and affirm another person's perspective. Now, these are for the people who may be new to knowing what microaggressions are, and maybe you yourself has been a culprit. Oh, I never thought that saying, oh my gosh, you're so articulate to a Black person was a microaggression. I mean, so I want you to know that when someone does come to you and say, hey, what you said or what you did kind of offended me, first, just listen. Really take time to listen. And then acknowledge and affirm the other person's perspective. You don't have to say they're right or wrong. This is not about a space of being combative with one another. This is about combating the subtleties of racism and how they show up in the way that we communicate with one another. And listening also is an amazing space of education. Understanding someone else's perspective because of them being in a marginalized group. Now you're getting an education when you listen. Teresa said, show a little empathy. Yes, show a little empathy. So if that's one of the call to actions that you feel that you can take on, then write that down for yourself. Take it into the next week, into the weekend, and say, you know what, I'm going to listen more to some of my friends that maybe perhaps feel like they've been on the outside. Here's another one that you may like. This one may be for you. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And again, I'm just gonna make it plain. It is challenging and uncomfortable to talk about race in the workplace, to talk about racial injustice, to talk about the inequalities, to talk about the marginalizations. It's uncomfortable to talk about these things. And for people of color and Black people specifically, sometimes we just tired of talking about it, right? It could be exhausting. But being comfortable with the uncomfortable will finally get us to a place where we can move beyond the surface level conversations of how systemic racism is plaguing our workplaces. That's the only way we're going to get there. I forget what book I was reading, and it was just talking about what's our endurance in having talks about race. And sometimes our endurance is very short because it could be an uncomfortable thing to talk about. But just if you know that you may shy away or resist in these conversations because you're uncomfortable, then as Sheryl Sandberg has said, lean into it. Lean into it. You don't have to agree with the person, but just show some understanding. Racism is subjective, and what you say to a Black person might be racist, but not when you say it to someone else. Oh, Yin, great stuff. And that's why listening is a good one. You start off with being aware. Oh, wait, okay, microaggressions, they exist. I see what it is. And then, okay, I don't understand it all just yet, so let me listen. And then you say, all right, I'm feeling uncomfortable, but it's okay. I can be uncomfortable because I have to listen so that I can become more aware. I'm looking at like side to side, like I'm actually looking at people. I'm talking to y'all, but I'm getting a little animated. I'm like, what am I looking at? So those are 3 ways so far, okay? The next one, and this is, again, we're all at different levels of being able to walk in confidence when talking about race. But the 4th one is, don't be silent, speak up. And this goes out, and I'm gonna just make it plain. This goes out to all my willing white people. And I always say my willing white women because, that's where it came from. But when you're willing to be uncomfortable, when you're willing to listen, when you're willing to become more aware, when you have people of color or more marginalized groups that are dealing with these infractions of microaggressions, sometimes we just do not have the capacity to really defend ourselves. And sometimes when we do show up and defend ourselves, then someone can take offense. And so in this space, you hear this word all the time. How do you become an ally? You become an ally by speaking up on behalf of someone else. So that when you see or you hear a microaggression, or you see someone just being treated unfairly, perhaps based off of their own unconscious bias, it is an opportunity for you to speak up and not be silent. Do not be sovereign with these microaggressions that are ushering in these subtle spaces of racism. Don't be silent. Speak up. Imagine in elementary school if more people were to speak up to a bully. This is kind of where it's happening. But of course, when you speak up, you do it with a space of compassion because you do understand that sometimes these microaggressions are expressed because of unconscious bias, meaning I didn't even know that what I was saying was kind of racist. I didn't realize what I was saying was going to be offensive. So you move in a space of compassion and education. Why? Because you became more aware. Then you started listening. Then you got comfortable with the uncomfortable. And now you're jumping into action by speaking up and not remaining silent. So maybe that's one for you. Okay. And then the last one, now this is for my folks. Gabriel says, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Come on, Gabriel. Co-signing, giving me some good stuff. Yes, that is absolutely what the case is with that. Speak up. Now, the last call to action I'm going to offer you. And again, this may be where you are in your journey. But I would say to be a disruptor. Be an interrupter. Make some noise. Make some good trouble. Be an innovator. Disrupt when you see things that are turning into status quo. Initiate the conversation of, hold on a second, what you said, that wasn't fair. That's in the space of speaking up. But when you interrupt and you disrupt, that means you're leading by action as well. Does that make sense? Everybody with me? Be a disruptor. Interrupt the status quo. Interrupt the sovereignty of this new language of racism, the subtlety of racism and how it seeps into our workplace. Interrupt that. Interrupting it is, for example, Staffbase inviting me to have this conversation and to turn it into a game show and teach you how to be anti-racist. What? Big ups to Staffbase. So when you do these things, and now you've got a target, you go into the office as communicators. In what way? What's one way? There's so many different, avenues where we need to fight racism, but what's one way that I can tackle in my own office? It's becoming aware about microaggressions and how they show up, educating people about it, being aware, listening to the marginalized people in your office, the Black people, the women, the disabled. So listen, be comfortable with being uncomfortable, push through that, speak up, don't go silent. And when you're ready and you're fired up, be a disruptor. Interrupt the status quo. Interrupt the sovereignty that people sit with when it comes to microaggressions. Don't let them play it off as a joke. It was not a joke. It was your unconscious bias rearing its ugly head. And you don't deserve to be ugly. All right, I'm checking the chat. It says we can't move forward. Brianna says we can't move forward as a society if we don't, disrupt. Disruption has always been a catalyst for change. Yes, you got it right. So I've got one more poll. And then if you've got questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Okay. If you've got questions, drop it in the chat. But here's the last question. How will you become more anti-racist? So in this space, we've become more aware. We've identified some examples. We see that microaggressions stem from unconscious bias. And as communicators, we can go into our spaces, our workplaces, and now we can be proactive against racism. But how will you become more anti-racist? Which one works the most for you? Oh, and I'm gonna just tell y'all right now, there is no wrong answer on this one. Be aware and reflect, listen and affirm, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Don't be silent, speak up, disrupt, interrupt. Maybe you, in your journey and the courage that you have within your heart, you can be all of the above. Maybe you want to be honest with yourself and say, Sherhara, I just learned something new today, or I've got a deeper understanding about what this is about. I think my task is to just be aware, really reflect. Maybe you're in a space where I am aware, but I think I need to listen more. Let's see where we're at. Everybody's like, all of the above, all of the above. Yes, all of the above. And then Megan, congratulations. Look at that. You get confetti. Megan, I do not have a real prize for you. But everyone give Megan a round of applause for making it up on the top of the leaderboard. Give her some hands. Congratulations to you, Megan. And as I close out, I want to share just two last quotes. And this is where I'm going to bring back my slides. I want to share two last quotes. Put this in presentation mode here. I think we got this one. We went through all of these. Got that. Here's a quote. And now I say this to how to be a great communicator. And we're all communicators here. But speak in such a way that others love to listen to you, and listen in such a way that others love to speak to you. This is always a great quote of mine. I have not locked down who said it, but for right now, it's a person named Anonymous. But speak in such a way that others love to listen to you, and listen in such a way that others love to speak to you. And that second part is perhaps the most active thing you can do in the fight against microaggressions, racism, and being anti-racist, is to listen in such a way that others love to speak to you. Because if they love to speak to you, they're going to share things about their experience that give you even more insight about how racism shows up in these spaces. And then the second quote, my favorite, Maya Angelou, she says, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I offer that in the space of allyship and being supportive. I offer that by using this space of how do we fight racism? How do we create an inclusive workplace? And when you show up and you put forth action and you speak up and you disrupt, a lot of people in your workplace are going to feel good about where they work, feel good about the people that they work with. So I certainly hope that this was a space where you not only learned a little bit about what microaggressions are, but you've learned an aspect of how you can fight microaggressions, which is also a part of how racism shows up in our workplace, which is then becoming the new language of racism. It's one aspect, microaggressions, sponsored by unconscious bias. But now there's one piece that you know and understand just a bit more so you can feel confident in truly creating a workplace that people feel inclusive. All right. I love the Maya Angelou quote. Awesome. Appreciate the action items. Starting with one-on-one can help. Have a few talking points ready in practice. So when you hear someone say something racist or, yes, you got all of that. We say you have something to come prepared. So come prepared. Think about your thoughts before. Terrific quote. Great reminder. Love the second sentence. Yes. In many ways, it is even more powerful when you disrupt because it must be really important if you're speaking out about it. Yep. Thank you. You're very welcome. It's interesting learning more about this and being intentional about eliminating microaggressions. Yes, 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 yes. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. It has been my absolute pleasure to join you all for the final hour. Thank you so much, Teresa, and everyone for participating. I definitely know that this has been a place where I can step outside of my comfort zone as well. I typically do not find myself in spaces where I'm talking about, racial equality. But we all have something to contribute from our own unique spaces of expertise. So find that unique space of expertise, get in these offices, speak up, and disrupt. Thank you all. Thank you, everyone.